Good morning and welcome to Hoosier Property Taxes, The Local Impact. My name is Emily Gorman and I am the Director of Community Engagement for AARP Indiana. And we're hosting this event today because property taxes are critical to the well-being of our communities, but older Hoosiers could not always afford them. This is especially true when they're experiencing property tax increases on top of other rising monthly expenses like utilities, groceries, and healthcare. During 2025's state legislative session, AARP Indiana was fighting for legislation to keep property taxes affordable at the State House. As a part of our commitment to keep Hoosiers 50+ informed and prepared, we want to take time today to walk you through some of the impacts and the changes that you can expect as a result of Senate Enrolled Act 1 from this year's legislative session. While this topic can often feel really complex and complicated, we hope that you're going to find today's event informative and useful as you plan ahead for how SEA 1 will impact you on a local level. To kick things off this morning, I want to introduce two of our local leaders to share some thoughts and insights into the anticipated impacts on our property taxes locally. Firstly, we have a few words from Allen County Commissioner Therese Brown. Commissioner Therese Brown has served Allen County since 1978, holding roles as Treasurer's Office staff, auditor, clerk of the courts, and currently as County Commissioner for District 2. She was named the 2022 North Distinguished County Commissioner of the Year. She serves on multiple boards focused on mental health, economic development, and community connectivity. A graduate of Bishop Dwenger and Indiana Wesleyan, she lives in Huntertown with her husband. And I'm going to welcome on the screen Commissioner Brown.
All for being able to attend this seminar that the AARP, as well as the Association of Indiana Counties, has been able to pull together to discuss Senate Enrolled Act 1 that just recently passed this past legislative session. As some of you are aware, there's a lot of tax implications through this whole new change through this bill. One of those things is that the Allen County Council, or councils across the state of Indiana, will now be in the driver's seat for the majority of units within its jurisdiction to set local income tax rates for additional funding that may be necessary for the operation of each of those units. In Allen County, it will be a unique process that obviously, as across the state of Indiana, there will be a lot of change, a lot of dialogue to try to maneuver through this process. There's definitely going to be a unique aspect for jurisdictions that are involved within the county, be it libraries, townships, cities, and towns. Those institutions will have a lot more on their plate to try to resolve what those shortcomings through the loss of revenue through property taxes will have on them. So those are the comments, at least at this point, that I have. And I know that those that are coming after me will dig deeper into the subject matter to be able to address some of the things that we know, at least at this stage, are going to impact local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. And next, I have the pleasure of introducing the president of the Fort Wayne City Council, Russ Yale, to share his thoughts on the impacts of SEA 1 on our local community here in Fort Wayne. Council President Yale has been serving the city and residents of District 2 since 2012. A lifelong resident of Fort Wayne, he and his wife, Monica, are raising their 2 children in the community they proudly call home. He's a commercial real estate broker with over 300 transactions and active in numerous civic and professional organizations, including the Hands Board, Fort Wayne Sports Corporation, and Fellowship Missionary Church. Good morning, President Yale, and welcome. I'm going to hand over to you.
Morning. Thank you so much for having me. I've been asked to talk about the effect of SEA 1 on the city of Fort Wayne, specifically our budget. Now, SEA 1, as we all know, comes from inflation. The logic of it comes from inflation. First, we experienced general inflation in all prices everywhere. And we had home inflation. Our home values went up, which maybe was a good thing temporarily. But with that, then there was tax inflation on our homes, and government, the city of Fort Wayne, we have had some inflation as far as revenues coming in, but we've also had equal amounts of inflation as far as the expenditures. So the good news is for those of us that are property taxpayers, we're going to pay less beginning next year in property taxes. And then we'll see even further tax savings going forward. The challenge for me, though, is the one entrusted to making sure that the city's bills are paid, is I'm going to be receiving, the city of Fort Wayne is going to be receiving less money to do that. And the challenge remains because, as we all know, inflation hasn't stopped. Inflation, for me, continues as your elected official. All expenses continue to go up. So this very first round that we just experienced last week in finalizing our 2026 budget could be achieved through belt tightening. We did receive less revenue. We are expecting to see less revenue come in, and with inflation, it creates a sizable gap. But we took the approach of, first of all, forming a fiscal task force, which was the mayor's initiative to try to look at systematic changes. In the meantime, we're avoiding bonding. We are using alternative funds first, such as TIF dollars rather than property tax and income tax dollars, and we're holding off from some discretionary projects. Now, the real challenge beyond belt tightening comes in 2 years when we are going to experience massive revenue losses as the SCA1 kicks in fully. And in all good faith, we cannot cut our way there. If I were to lay off every single person within City Hall and the mayor was the only one answering the phones, I do not think that we could actually cut and balance the budget with that. So all cities, including the city of Fort Wayne, are going to have to do 4 things or not have a balanced budget. They're going to have to become more efficient. They're going to have to cut economic development partnerships. They're going to have to cut services, and they're going to have to coordinate between the city and county governments. If you don't do all 4 of those things, the only alternative is going to be to raise income taxes. And so I think that the net effect of SCA1, the positive side, is we're all going to pay less in property taxes. The downside is that we're going to, from the city's revenue perspective, is we're going to have a shift of taxes to working families. We're going to have weaker cities overall. And the question is going to remain whether or not income taxes are going to go up.
Thank you so much, President Yale. I really appreciate you joining us this morning and your leadership for the city of Fort Wayne. The last welcome I have for you this morning is AARP Indiana's very own volunteer, Jeff Hale, our team leader for the local work we do here in Fort Wayne, as well as a member of our volunteer state legislative team. Jeff, good morning. I'm going to welcome you on the screen and hand over to you.
Oh, good morning, and thank you, Emily, and thank you, Commissioner Brown and Councilman Yale, for your contributions to the discussion. As you already heard, my name is Jeff Hale, and I am the team leader for the AARP Indiana Fort Wayne Volunteers. You might have seen us at various local events, and as we attempt to bring awareness to the quality of life for those age 50 plus in the community. We invite you to join us at our events, but also to apply to become a volunteer and join our team should you be so inclined. Specific to the discussion, seniors by and large understand the importance of taxes in general, and specifically property taxes for the reason Emily just mentioned. Property taxes are critical to the well-being of our communities. Building on the idea is that the reality seniors face of current incomes failing to appreciably increase as costs of living rise, given that our work life is in the past. Many seniors live frugally and independently, but rising costs can outpace their fixed incomes, causing significant stress. Some seniors argue that they should be exempt from personal property taxes for services they no longer use, such as public education. Maybe, but I contend even the most restrictive thinking senior understands the futility of piecemealing services based on immediate usage. Nevertheless, a personal perspective, there is an existential balance between available funds, a comfortable life, and the prospect of having to sacrifice what we have acquired for personal use due to inability to afford taxes, particularly property taxes. Therein lies the importance of today's forum and AARP Indiana's attention to this issue. With that in mind, back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing more from you later on in the program. Now we're going to move on to the meat and potatoes of today. What changes can you expect to see from your property taxes going forward? To that end, we have a wonderful lineup of guests and experts for the remainder of today's program to break this down for you in a way that truly makes sense. Our first guest is Larry DeBoer. Larry is a professor emeritus of agricultural economics at Purdue University. He retired in 2021 after 37 years at Purdue. He is an expert in state and local public policy, particularly in issues related to Indiana property taxation. Larry continues to share his expertise through consulting with research and policy organizations through a monthly column about Indiana and national economic topics called Capital Comments and the occasional presentation. Thank you so much for being here, Larry. I'm going to hand over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Emily. I'm very pleased to be with you here this morning. And so we're going to talk about Indiana property tax policy. We're going to talk about how it's done right now. We're going to take a look at the past and how we got here. And then we're going to look at SEA 1 and the future of property taxation in Indiana. In order to understand how it works and what's going to happen, you need to know something about how a homeowner's tax bill is constructed. And that's what this slide shows. Now, you can see this for yourself. Every spring, the county treasurer will send you a form. It's a TS1 that gives the rundown of how your property taxes are calculated. And if you take a look at it and come to it with a little bit of understanding, you can see exactly why your tax bill is what it is. But here's what it looks like. We start out at the top with gross assessed value. Now, that's set by the county assessor, and that's a prediction of the selling price of your house. And that's the starting point of the tax bill. Really is the assessor's attempt to figure out what your house could sell for if it was put on the open market. Now, you look at this number and maybe it's correct, maybe it isn't. But if it isn't correct, you can appeal. And that is the benefit of the market value system, that the taxpayer can effectively audit the assessor. You can tell whether that assessment is correct or not. So take a look at that number right at the top and see if it's anything like what you think the value of your house is, what it could sell for if you put it up for sale. But that's not what we tax. We actually subtract some very big deductions from gross assessed value. And the two big ones are the homestead standard deduction of $48,000. They subtract $48,000 right off the top. And then the supplemental deduction, which is 37.5% of what remains after the $48,000 is subtracted. So you subtract those two, and for the average homeowner, that cuts the taxable value of your home in half. Only about 50% of the gross assessed value of homes is actually taxable. So what's left over is the taxable assessed value, and it's called the net assessed value as well. And when you multiply that by the property tax rate, you get the gross tax bill. But we have to talk about where that rate comes from. First of all, the rate we're talking about is the sum of the rates of all the jurisdictions in which you live. So you live in a county, you probably in Allen County, you might live in Fort Wayne or other cities or towns. You live in a school corporation, you live in a library district, you live in some special districts, you live in a school corporation and a city and town, as I said. So you stack up all of those rates, that becomes the total property tax rate that shows up on your bill. Now, where do those rates come from? Those rates are set each year by each local government. And the way they do it is this, and it's important to know how this is done because this will really influence what happens with SEA 1 as we move into the future. The local jurisdiction, say the city of Fort Wayne, will take all of the net assessed value of all of the property within their jurisdiction, within their boundaries, and you add it up, and that's the taxable assessed value for the city. And that's the total net assessed value. That's the tax base for the city of Fort Wayne. And then they figure out how much they need to raise from property taxes in order to deliver city services. Now, the state puts a cap, a maximum on the amount that they can raise, but nonetheless, they are able to set how much can we raise from that property tax, how much levy, what is the levy that we need to deliver services. Now, they take that levy and they divide it by that net assessed value, and that becomes the tax rate. What that means is that the tax rate changes every year. If the levy rises faster than net assessed value, then the rate goes up. If the levy rises less than net assessed value rises, then the rate goes down. And that's actually what's been happening in most jurisdictions over the last 3 years is the rate has been going down. Now, that doesn't mean your tax bill has been going down. Of course, it has not. But that's because your net assessed value has been going up more than the rate is coming down. But the rate is set, and this is important to remember, the rate is set based on the relative growth between the levy and the net assessed value. Well, once you multiply that tax rate, some of the tax rates of all the units in which you live, times the net assessed value of your property, gross assessed value minus deductions, that's your gross tax bill. Well, we're still not done. Property tax is a complicated tax. Now we subtract credits, and there's two big credits that get subtracted. One is the local income tax credit for property tax relief. And this is a income tax rate, a local income tax rate that was passed in 59 counties, including Allen County, that raises revenue in order to deliver a property tax credit. And in Allen County, homeowners receive a 13.6% reduction in their property tax bills because of this local income tax credit for property tax relief. Now, it is a funded credit. That means that, yes, property taxpayers are paying less, 13.6% less, but that money is replaced from the money that's raised from the income tax. And that's an income tax of 0.37% on top of the other income taxes that are out there. So it's a funded credit, and it reduces property tax payments. The other credit is the constitutional circuit breaker credit. And for homeowners, that limits your tax bill to 1% of the gross assessed value. So all the way back to the top there, the gross assessed value, multiply that by 1%, and that's the maximum amount that you can pay in property taxes to all of the local units. Now, school referendum money is excluded from this, but all the others will be limited to 1% of your gross assessed value. If the tax bill, the gross tax bill, exceeds 1% of gross assessed value, then you get a credit to bring it down to that amount. And that then becomes the net tax bill. And the net tax bill is paid in two installments, one in May and one in November, and that would be November 10th, which is next Monday. And while I was practicing this last night, I said, I want to make sure to remind people that November 10th is the due date. And then I remembered that I needed to remind myself. So I sent the check this morning. So this came at an opportune time here. So November 10th, if you're paying property taxes on your own without the bank doing it in escrow, you got to get that check in by November 10th. Next slide, please. All right. Let's take a little look at the history of property tax policy in Indiana. And this is a chart that goes all the way back to 1951, so almost 75 years here. And what it is a chart that shows the statewide property tax payment. That is, what if people paid after deductions, after credits, what if people actually paid in property taxes as a percentage of income. So this is the average share of income that a taxpayer in Indiana has paid to the property tax. And as you can see, from 1951 to 1971, we had a pretty big increase there from 3% of income all the way up to 5% of income. And usually, as we'll see when looking at the history of the property tax policy, usually when you got a big increase in the share that's paid, the legislature would act. And so you got to wonder, why would it have taken 20 years for the legislature to step in and bring property taxes down? I think there were probably two reasons there. One was we had the baby boom going on at that point, and so the school enrollment was going way, way up. Lots more teachers needed, new facilities needed. And the other reason is the only way we had to pay for schools back then was the property tax. The sales tax wasn't invented until 1963, so it wasn't an option. And the adjusted gross income tax, as we know it today, also was invented in 63. Took a big legislative battle to get that done. And the rates were set at 2% each, 2% sales tax, 2% income tax. And I think legislators after that were loath to raise it right away after the long, hard battle to get them instituted. So 20 years of increases in property taxes. Finally, in 1973, as we'll see on the next slide, Governor Otis Bowen was elected governor, and he pushed through a big property tax reform. the 1973 reform. And that really began to establish the property tax as we know it today. So what was in that reform? First of all, there were rate and levy controls. Prior to this, local governments basically had a free hand in setting the amount of revenue they wanted to raise and the rate that was required to raise it. But now the state was going to slap a maximum levy and control some rates as well. Another thing they did was to institute more state aid to schools. We're going to raise money on the state level and raise less from the property tax for schools. They gave a state credit. So this was the first big credit given to property taxpayers, and it was 20% across the board. Everybody's taxes were cut by 20%. But to pay for this school aid and to pay for that credit, they raised the sales tax from 2 to 4%. And boy, that was a battle in the legislature. In fact, this bill passed on a tie vote in the Senate, and the lieutenant governor actually decided it in favor of the bill. So they raised the sales tax from 2 to 4 at that point. This is also when we first invented the local income tax, and a little bit later invented the first homestead credit, which is a credit that goes directly to homeowners. Well, on the next slide, well, you can see that that during the 80s and the 90s, the percentage crept up a little bit. But the next real crisis occurred in 1998 when the Indiana Supreme Court tossed out the old assessment system and instituted what is effectively market value assessment. That is, at this point, they said, hey, if we're going to get right with the Constitution, we've got to value property as it is actually valued out there in the market. So we went to market value. We also went to trending a little bit later. And trending is, hey, we're going to keep this thing right year after year. We're going to trend, adjust assessments year after year to keep them up with market values. So a great big change in the way that we did assessment at that point. Now, as it turned out, homeowners were underassessed to a greater degree than everybody else. And when we went to market value, homeowner assessed values went up more, and that created a big shift in taxes from business to homeowners, or it would have if the legislator hadn't acted. The legislature did a whole bunch of piecemeal efforts throughout that period from 98 to 2007, raising homestead deductions, passing a constitutional amendment to make that okay, tightening the levy controls so that levies couldn't go up as fast as they had been, more state aid for schools to take more of the burden off property taxes. Pay for that, they raised the sales tax from 5% to 6%. And then a whole lot of new local income taxes were instituted, many of them for property tax relief. Still, this was a problem. You can see there was a spike upward in 2007, and the Daniels administration instituted what I considered the second big comprehensive tax reform after 1973. And this was the reform of 2008. And we instituted even bigger homestead deductions. So this is where the deductions became, on average, half of the gross assessed value. They decided to get rid of the statewide credits, which kind of shaved a bit off of the top of all the levies, and instead to uproot one whole big levy. They said, let's eliminate property taxes for school general funds, which was one of the bigger uses of property taxes, and replace it all with state aid. Where do you get money for state aid? Raise the sales tax again. So now the sales tax is up 7%. So most of the increase in the sales tax we've seen since it was established has been to reduce property taxes, mostly by increasing school aid. So schools don't have to use property taxes so much. At this point, we also passed that circuit breaker into the Constitution by a vote in 2010. It was fully effective in 2011, which limited property taxes to a percentage of gross assessed value. So that's the system we were operating under throughout 2000 teens, and seemed to be working just fine. And then came the pandemic. And you see that little blip upward at the end there, the pandemic effect. And, you know, when you look at the whole 75-year history, that little blip doesn't look like much. But the property taxes is very much a what have you done for me lately game. It really doesn't matter to folks that property taxes are about half what they were as a share of income 50 years ago. What we're really concerned about is how are they compared to last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they are definitely up. And so that increase that you see there is enough to get the legislature to act. Now, what happened? Why did that happen? Let's take a look at what happened to assessed value. This is net assessed value statewide, and it's the percentage changes year to year. You see it's labeled with a few of the events from the past. But take a look at the period at the end of the 20-teens when the net assessed value increases began to climb from the 2 to 3% range towards about 5%, even before the pandemic. And what was going on there was home values were starting to rise more rapidly. And the reason for that was that the housing construction, the housing industry, really never recovered from the Great Recession. Big collapse in housing that happened during 2007, 8, 9, 10. We've never gotten back to building homes as rapidly as we did in the 1990s and in the double O's. And so with that short supply of housing, prices began to rise. Well, then here comes the pandemic. You got all those supply disruptions, and that ended up raising the prices of construction materials and equipment. And we had lower mortgage rates, which increased demand. And we had people demanding more space because they were locked down or they were working from home. And so demand increased and supply was restricted and costs went up. And that caused a great big spike in the value of homes. So the spike in the value of homes began in 2021. Assessors caught that change through market value trending in 2022, because you have to look backwards to get the data for assessment. So in 2022, they picked up the change from 21. And that became the values used for taxes in 2023. So there you see in 2023, a great big increase in the net assessed value of homes on which taxes were based, and property generally going up as well. In 2024 and 2025, the increases in net assessed value remained high relative to what it had been. So assessed value is going up a whole lot. But wait a minute, don't we have a maximum levy? If assessed values go up a whole lot and the levy stays the same, won't tax rates go down? And yes, they would. That would happen. And it did happen for the part of the property tax that is under the maximum levy. But two important kinds of taxes, of property taxes, are not under the maximum levy. Those are the school referendum rates and the debt service rates. With those, you can leave the rate fixed, and as assessed value rises, that fixed rate generates more revenue. And so levies went up more rapidly in the last 3 years than they had at any time before that, other than the crisis in 2007. So we've had rapid increases in the levy, rapid increases in assessed value. And if you look at the next slide, you can see the shares of different property types in total property tax payments from 2016 to the most recent data I had for this, 2024. If you look at the two blue parts of this chart, you see homesteads and you see other residential. And for this residential property, for the property where people live, in 2016, they paid 43.5% of the property tax. By 2024, they were paying 52.1% of the property tax. Property taxes shifted from business towards homeowners because home values were rising faster than other kinds of property. Well, as we know, when homeowners get hit with the property tax, the legislature usually steps in to act. And that's what happened here in the spring of 2025. I consider this to be the third comprehensive property tax reform, joining 1973 and 2008. These are big changes, and they're going to phase in from 2026 to 2031. So for the next 6 years, the property tax is going to be different in important ways every single year. So let's take a look at the schedule and see what all is going to be happening. First thing that happens, 2026, for taxes payable next year, there's going to be a supplemental homestead credit, right? Credit subtracted from the tax bill after the rates are set. This credit's going to be 10% up to $300. So if your tax bill is over $3,000, you get a $300 reduction. Otherwise, you'll get a 10% reduction. That is an unfunded credit, meaning that the revenue will not be replaced from any other revenue source. The taxpayers are going to pay less, and local governments are going to receive less in revenue because of the supplemental homestead credit. We're also going to start in 2026 increasing the supplemental deduction. It's 37.5% now. It's going to go all the way up to 66.7% by 2031. That's going to happen in six increments, 6 steps. We're also going to institute a new deduction for rental housing and farmland all the way up to 33.4% by 2031. And these folks have never gotten a big deduction before. So this is entirely new, an entirely new deduction for rental housing and farmland. Now, notice what this does. This means that net assessed value will be lower, and that's the tax base for local governments. And I've looked at it, and it looks to me like we're not going to get much growth in net assessed value over the next 6 years as these deductions phase in. And if net assessed value doesn't increase, but the levy continues to rise, only to cover inflation, well, then tax rates have to go up. So one thing we'll be seeing from 2026 to 2031 is a rise in tax rates. Yes, you'll be getting bigger deductions, but you'll be paying higher tax rates, and your gross assessed value, your market value, will be changing as well. It makes it kind of hard to say what's really going to happen to people's tax bills year to year to year. We'll talk about that in another minute here. What happens in 2027? Well, in 2027, we're going to put in a new personal property exemption. Now, personal property is mostly business equipment. And so you think of the things, the equipment that businesses use to produce the products and deliver the services that they do. That's the equipment we're talking about. If a business owns less than $2 million in equipment, that is, if they paid less than $2 million for the equipment that they own in total, then they will be exempt from personal property taxes. They'll still pay on their land and buildings, but they won't have to pay taxes on their equipment. Now, that limit these days, right now, is $80,000. So we're moving it up from 80,000 to 2 million in one big increment. And that's going to have a measurable effect on the property tax base. It's going to cut taxes for a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. It's also going to reduce net assessed value again. Now, notice that the $2 million limit means that big business will continue to pay their taxes on personal property. GM has a whole lot more than $2 million in equipment, and they will continue to pay their personal property taxes. In 2028, we're going to completely revamp the local income tax procedures, and that's what the Fort Wayne and Allen County officials were talking about the decisions that need to be made. So we're going to really change local income taxes. But one of the things that happens is we're going to eliminate the local income tax credits for property tax relief. And that 13.6% reduction that homeowners receive in Allen County is going to go away. And so at that point, homeowner property taxes are likely to rise. That means you're going to get at least the income tax, the 37 hundredths, the 0.37% income tax will be eliminated too, and local officials will have to decide what sorts of changes will be made in lit as a result of that. 59 counties have this local income taxes for property tax relief, and that'll have a big effect on homeowner taxes in those counties. Then from 2029 to 31, we get the final phase in of the supplemental deduction and the 33.4% deduction for farmland and rental housing. But at this time also, the $48,000 standard deduction is going to be phasing out. So that bit by bit, that is going to be eliminated through 2031, so that by 2031, homeowners will be receiving a 2/3 percentage reduction with no fixed $48,000 component. All right, what does it all mean? And let's take a look at the last slide here. Well, there's a lot of moving parts in this thing. So predicting what will happen to your taxes is very, very difficult. One thing I think we can say is that homestead taxes will likely be lower compared to what they would have been had we not changed the policy. So if you imagine an alternate universe where the Daniels reform just rolled forward and we didn't change the way we do property taxes and local income taxes, yes, homeowner taxes will probably be lower for most folks than they would have been under that other scenario. Now, that probably won't be true if you have a home valued at less than $102,000, because for homes like that, that $48,000 fixed deduction was a very big percentage of their home value, and the 66.7 actually won't add up to the total amount that the 48,000 plus the 37.5% reduced value for those lower valued homeowners. So those lower valued homeowners probably won't see a reduction in taxes relative to what they would have been. Now, comparing your policy and your taxes to what it would have been, that's a very good way to analyze policy. You pass a new policy and you say, how does this change the way things would be? But that's not how people think. That's not how you think. That's not how I think. We compare our taxes not to what they would have been, but to what they were last year. And I think in 2026, a lot of people are going to see reductions in their property tax from what they were in 25 because of the supplemental homestead credit, that 10% or $300 reduction. Most folks wouldn't have ordinarily seen an increase of 10%. And so when we subtract 10%, it should reduce homeowner property taxes. Once we get to 2027, however, that supplemental homestead credit is still there, of course, but it doesn't increase. The deductions are continuing to increase. What happens to your gross assessed value, we don't know, might continue to increase. But at this point, we'll be yanking that portion of personal property out of the tax base, meaning the tax base won't rise, may even fall, which means tax rates will go up more. Possible in 2027 that homeowner property taxes will rise a little bit more than they would have ordinarily because the tax base will shrink. In 2028, we are almost certain to see increases in homeowner property taxes because of the elimination of the local income tax credits. You're no longer going to be getting that 13.6% reduction, so property taxes will rise. Your income tax may fall, maybe, but your property taxes will certainly rise. Almost certainly rise. There's no certainty here. Almost certainly rise in 2028. And then finally, in 2029 to 31, what happens then is the further phase in of deductions. So the taxable assessed value of your homes will probably not be rising, might even be falling over that period. But remember, that also means that the net assessed value will be going down, and so tax rates will be going up more. Your assessed value not rising, your tax rates going up. Will your tax bill go up? Will it go down? Will it stay the same? You can't tell at this point, but a lot of moving parts, and that's the sort of thing that's going to happen. So much depends on the growth in home values and other property values. Much depends on whether you've got the credit or not, and as Allen County does. Much depends on how much personal property that you have in your county and how much of it will be newly exempt. Again, a lot of moving parts, and so we'll see. But I think in 26, homeowner taxes probably will end up being lower than they were in 2025. Well, that's what we know about SEA1 from a property tax point of view. I suspect that the legislature will be looking at this policy between now and 2031. I would be very surprised if they didn't make some changes here and there in the way things are done as we discover things that we don't like or things that should have been done. There's always unexpected consequences to big policy changes like this. But that's the best I can do for you in terms of what we're looking at in the future. So thanks very much, and take it away, Emily.
Thank you, Larry. I am so grateful for that presentation. The way, as you said, there are so many moving parts, but the way that you were able to break it down in a way that's easy to digest is really impressive. And so I'm really grateful that you were able to come on and do that today. Our next guest should be able to help us further build on that understanding. We are going to invite David Bodorf and Campbell Ricci to join us. Campbell Ricci serves as the Policy and Financial Resources Director for Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, or AIM, where he serves on the legislative team and provides technical assistance to the membership. He joined AIM in the fall of 2019, and prior to working there, Campbell worked at the Indiana Senate as Deputy Policy Director. He holds master's degrees in Finance and Business Administration from the Indiana University Kelley School of Business and bachelor's degrees in Economics and Spanish Literature from Indiana University. David worked for the Indiana House of Representatives for 10 years, and in 2004, David was named as the Executive Director of the Association of Indiana Counties. He serves as primary staff to the AIC Board of Directors and Executive Committee. He has served on several committees for the National Association of Counties. He currently serves as treasurer of the Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute. He is also a member of the state's Justice Reinvestment Advisory Council, the JRAC. So thank you so much for joining us, David and Campbell. I am going to hand over to you.
All right. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. I really appreciate all the work your organization is doing to try to educate your members. It's a complicated subject. And so I know we appreciate the opportunity to present our information to your members.
I want to thank you as well. It's always great to have these conversations, and the more people understand this, I think the better the policy will be going forward.
So as Dr. DeBoer had mentioned, a lot of the changes in Senate Bill 1 are being phased in over the next few years, which obviously was done on purpose, I think, so that the members of the General Assembly could measure the changes they're making. And if they have to make modifications before full implementation, they'll be able to do that. And it's really important to know that each taxing district could be treated differently under property taxes and under Senate Bill 1. We'll have overall data for a county, but depending on the taxing district you live in, your property taxes could be treated dramatically differently based on the makeup of the assessed value within your taxing district. One thing that going forward, Commissioner Brown mentioned this, that county councils or county fiscal bodies will have a little bit more authority under the new structure going forward. I think the intent there was to create some more transparency on who is responsible for property tax increases and local income tax increases. So I think the General Assembly will probably review that going forward, but that's sort of our opening comments. Campbell, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
In addition to that, I mean, obviously the county council gets a lot more power under the new local income tax structure, but also cities and towns, especially the larger cities and towns like City of Fort Wayne and New Haven, will have the ability to do their own income tax rate for the first time ever. They've always been countywide rates. They're being split up. All the different units are sort of doing them differently now. And so that's going to be a big change on the horizon also for how you engage publicly with your local units.
And I think one thing to remember about the county fiscal body or county council is taxpayers get to vote for 4 out of the 7 council members. You get to vote for 3 at large and then your individual district. So taxpayers have a lot more sort of authority and influence over the county council than they do other fiscal bodies around the state. So, Dr. DeBoer mentioned the new 10% homestead credit, again, up to $300. Again, that is, there's no replacement revenue for that that came along with this bill. So that's immediately going to be a revenue reduction for local units of government. Generally, counties make up about 20 to 23% of the property tax bill. So if a taxpayer is getting that $300 credit, around 20 to 25% of that will come from the county's levy, and the remainder of it will come from the other units' levies based on their overall taxing district in the levy. So,
and around half of it is the school corporations, and then you see cities around 20 to 25%, counties around 20 to 25%, and all the other units they're in that last 10%. So, but schools are the biggest property tax collector.
Again, Dr. DeBoer mentioned there's a decrease in the agriculture base rate. So he mentioned this as, as one class of property receives a tax break, oftentimes other classes of property pay more. And so because the agriculture base rate will decrease, the assessed value, the tax rate will increase. So other taxpayers, in essence, make up some of the difference of the revenue that the agriculture community would have paid. Next is another credit again. For those over 65, there's a $150 credit. And again, that comes off the bottom of the tax bill, and same for the disabled deductions. Historically, those had been assessed value deductions, which shifted the burden onto other taxpayers. But these credits mean, again, it's a loss of revenue for the units.
Yeah, I mean, prior to this change, if you were already at the tax caps on your property, you wouldn't get any benefit from those deductions. I think that was the policy of the General Assembly. They wanted everyone to be able to benefit from those if they're over 65 or they're disabled, so they switched them to credits. And so depending on how your tax base looks, that might be more money lost to local governments. But in some cases, the deductions were worth more too. So it just depends on your individual property there.
Another change going forward is the growth quotient. Again, this is how much the controlled levies can grow. It's 4%, but that's really what I call the gross growth quotient. Nobody really gets 4% growth because of the way the tax caps work. More likely it would be less than 3% will be our levy collections for the controlled levies in 2026. Another huge item, part of Senate Bill 1, was this change in the business personal property tax. Again, as one class of property pays less, others pay more. So going into session, our focus was really on the increased burden on homeowners because how fast the assessed value was growing on residential housing compared to other classes of property. So they were absorbing a bigger piece of the liability pie. So that was sort of our focus going into session. But the business community wanted this reduction in their liability on business personal property. So they were able to achieve that and have that included in Senate Bill 1. And depending on your taxing district, it could have a significant effect on your residential liability.
I'll say on this one, like Larry also mentioned that they're increasing the de minimis exemption up to $2 million. So that takes a lot of businesses off the tax roll. But actually the dollar value of that entire change, which removes roughly 90% of the businesses from personal property tax, is lower than the dollar value impact of this business personal property 30% depreciation floor, because that does affect those big industrial payers. That does affect your GM. Their property is going to be worth far less on the tax rolls. But that doesn't phase in until, probably 10 to 15 years, you'll really see the effect of that because it's only on new property. So that is one of those things where you have to continue to watch that impact as it goes down the line. Immediately, this does not really affect you at all, homeowner taxes or local government budgets, but down the line, it does affect it quite a bit.
And the 30% floor is a really complicated issue, as well as business personal property, but it's important to remember that residential property, again, starts off at market value, but business personal property in Indiana, the way the cost tables worked, we call them, business property never paid 100% of the value. They got a deduction immediately, oftentimes down to about 60 to 65%. And so by giving them the tax break at the beginning, Indiana used to have a minimum tax at the bottom, which we call the 30% floor, and that created stability into the property tax system. But again, that is going away for the most part going forward. So that's a nice break for the business community to have that included in Senate Bill 1.
And this was sort of designed because all the new deductions for homeowners and for farmers and rentals and all that pushed a lot of increased taxes on the business community. This was supposed to be their sort of escape valve for that, where they get some relief too. It was all very complicated calculation they were working on at the legislature.
Next. So kind of what does this mean for Allen County units of government? So the next couple of slides, I know the print is a little bit small. You can go to the Legislative Services Agency and type in Senate Enrolled Act 1, go to the fiscal note, and embedded in the fiscal note is a link to these numbers that show how much, how local units of government are going to be affected because of Senate Bill 1. And actually, Allen County, although they'll have a reduction in revenue of what they would have received, they're still getting some modest growth, as you can see here based on these slides. I don't know if you can go to the next slide. I think it has more. Oh, I'm sorry, go back 1 or 2 slides there. Yeah, so here on Allen County, you can see across the top, they'll still have some modest growth. The columns in the far right-hand column show the year-over-year percentage growth increase. So pretty modest there in 26. A change, a revenue collection actually goes up in 27 and then back to about 2.1% in 28. And that's for the county. And you can see each unit is listed here, the school corporations and the cities and towns. So Cam, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about Fort Wayne Civil City or some of the municipalities.
Well, I would just say on a broad look, statewide, you were seeing probably without this change, 3 to 5% property tax levy growth year over year. And now it's, probably depending on your unit between 0 and 2%. Allen County is doing, and the units there are doing better than most. I mean, they're still going to be around that 3% on average over the next 3 years. But of course, this only goes out 3 years. After that, you continue to see that personal property tax phase in. You continue to see those new deductions phasing in. So you would expect things to remain slower, growing or dipping negative as you go out into a 10-year time horizon. But you see the biggest impact you see immediately is in that first year when you see that new tax credit come online. So you'll see that, like if you look at Fort Wayne, their growth rate goes down to around 1% in that first year, and that's because all the residences are paying, getting that credit. But then you see that growth going forward after that.
Yeah, and then you can see on some of the school corporations, you see the negative numbers for 26. And again, for municipalities, cities, towns, and counties, we are going to have a new income tax option going forward, which will help with our revenue, but school corporations do not have that income tax option. So they have a different challenge than cities and towns and counties.
And they're already getting some of the income tax through the property tax relief rate and through some other mechanisms that allowed it to go to schools, and all of those are going away in the new system. So the schools will have a bigger hole to fill that will likely come from referenda becoming more popular.
So again, this information is on the Legislative Services Agency's website. You can get to that through the Indiana General Assembly's website. And if need be, we can send the link to the AARP so they can send it out to you all. So again, this is just the rest of the units, including the TIFs in Allen County. So here's some of the income tax reforms Dr. DeBoer mentioned and Campbell and I alluded to. Going forward, there's no longer what was called local income tax councils, which was sort of phantom councils where votes were distributed between the county, the cities, and the towns, and each of those units had a vote on what the income tax rate was going to be. So those are dissolved going forward. But again, as Campbell mentioned, the county council will be able to do their own rate, and the county will receive all that money. And then the municipalities, based on their population, could do their own income tax rate and receive that share of the money.
Yeah, I mean, sort of before this, it would be one rate countywide and distributed based on property tax levy to all the units. Now you're going to see different rates adopted for each unit type that goes 100% to that unit type. So a different rate for the county, a different rate for the townships, a different rate for the city. And so that in that way, it'll be more clear what each one is getting, and it's not tied to property taxes anymore.
Yeah. And again, Allen County, Fort Wayne had the old local income tax councils, which was this mixed body. To kind of put this in perspective for other units outside of Allen County, perhaps, like in the county I live in, the county council themselves vote in the income tax, but the county only gets about 36% of the revenue. The rest of the revenue goes to the other units. So that's, again, maybe perhaps one of the transparency guidelines for Senate Bill 1 was trying to make it better for taxpayers to understand who raised my income tax and where's that money going. So in the new system, there'll be a little bit more transparency and clarity there.
you've had conflicts in the past both ways, like some where the county wants to raise a rate for let's say a new jail or whatever, but they have to distribute X amount to the other units, and so it's really hard for them to do it. And then you'll also have cities who want to raise the income tax rate for some specific project but have no ability to, and their county council doesn't want to. And so that has created conflicts in the past that hopefully once this new system gets all worked out well, will be eliminated, and each unit will basically be able to go their own way on that.
And so in the new system, again, the county will have its own rate, and everybody in the county will pay that rate. And then if you live in a municipality that adopts an income tax, that municipality rate will stack on top of the county rate, just like property taxes do. Because again, no matter where you live, in essence, you get county services. The county services that take up most of our budget are operation of the court system. We pay for the prosecutor staff, the public defenders, operation of the jail. Those are all services that everybody in the county receives, no matter what city or town they live in. But this is a significant change on this income tax rate stacking. So, Cam, I don't know if you have any.
I would say you will probably have different income tax rates depending on where you live. The maximum rate is the same everywhere, because if you're a small town, you get your tax base is all the unincorporated areas and all the small towns. So it's the same maximum rate for everyone, but it's likely that you'll see, if you live in a larger city or town, a higher rate than you do if you're in the rural areas.
Right. Yeah, in unincorporated area, income tax rates may actually decrease. It would be up to the county council, but the possibility is there for that rate to decrease if you're in the unincorporated area. So again, this is the county lit structure. The county can adopt up to 1.2% and use that for basically general operating procedures. But within that 1.2 will be operation of the jail, the court system, the public defender, the prosecutor's office. So this is a pretty significant change. In the old system, we had what we called buckets of income tax, and sometimes it was dedicated for a particular purpose, like the edit was the old economic development income tax. Originally, it could be used only for economic development, but that was softened over the years where it could be used for any general purpose. The big change we think is going to be this property tax replacement credit going away. Dr. DeBoer mentioned that Allen County uses some of their income tax to hold down property taxes, but under the new system, it could happen, but to a lesser degree, where the county could apply some of their rate to property tax relief, but only for the county's levy, not for everybody's levy. Currently, when you have property tax relief income tax, it applies to every levy, which helps hold down property taxes. But that's going to go away going forward. So in those 59 counties that have PTRC or homestead credits, we're going to see probably property tax increases for a lot of those property owners in those communities.
Of course, that's happening at the same time that the new deductions and everything are phasing in. So depending on how all that washes out, you might see slight increases or stabilizing, it all depends on your individual numbers in each county and how much they were doing PTRC before. Yeah.
And then the county can also do what we call the rural rate local income tax, which would be the county would vote that in. Some of the money would go to the small towns. But again, that would be up to the county council to vote that tax in. And then there's also a revenue for townships and libraries, an income tax revenue stream for that. But again, that'll be up to the county council under the current system to vote that income tax rate in for the townships, solid waste district, and libraries. So go ahead, Campbell. You want to explain this one?
On the fire EMS rate, this rate is adopted by the county council, but it goes to all the units that do fire protection, which is usually your townships, your fire territories, fire districts, and municipalities, and it's based on their service territory. This is sort of similar to the old public safety rate, but police are not included because police are all run by other cities or counties, and they have their own rates. But this is just specifically for fire.
Yeah. One of the challenges with that rate is in Allen County, I know they're doing a lot of changes with EMS, and I think this is probably an oversight, but the county council votes in that rate, but under the current statute, the county is not eligible for any of the money from the EMS rate. So that's something we're going to look at going forward next session to see if we can get that corrected, because a lot of counties do operate their own EMS first responders.
And we're looking at maybe just taking the municipalities out of the fire rate and just putting into their own rate, since there's no need for that to be adopted separately if we're already adopting our own rate. So there may be more work on the fire rate.
Yeah. And again, I know that Allen County is going through a township sort of consolidation, at least on the service side of it for fire and EMS, trying to create more territories or districts. Again, this is I kind of referenced this earlier, this is the non-municipal unit lit rate. Again, it could go for the small towns and the townships, solid waste districts, things like that. So the new cumulative income tax rate, I think, is 2.8%. If every unit adopted their maximum rate, a taxpayer could pay 2.8% in income tax. But not all of that would go to the county. Much of that would go for the cities and towns or townships or libraries.
Yeah.
So again, I mentioned this earlier. Again, this is the rural district rate. Again, this is adopted by the county council. This is for the unincorporated area, because the larger cities and towns will have their own rate. And the good thing for them is when they adopt their own rate, they'll get all that revenue for themselves. They don't have to share it with any other unit of government.
And this is the municipal rate. It's once again, it's up to 1.2%. It's done at the city council level. This is only for the smaller cities above 35. For the larger cities above 3,500, though there may be work on what those exact numbers are. And if you're up to 7,000, you can also choose to opt into that countywide rural rate, which some cities are going to need to do because they just don't have a wide enough tax base to get what they're getting today, and they're going to have to work with their counties. But this rate, of course, what we're working on the most in the next session to try to adjust the rate cap some for the larger cities and towns, and give more cities and towns options to opt into that countywide rate. So just because of how the numbers are looking in various counties, especially more rural counties. But that's going to be one of our biggest things we're working on next year from AIM's perspective.
And then finally, again, this is a little bit more detailed information on the how we cannot. It's going to be less attractive to use income tax for property tax relief going forward because of the new cap and how that would work. So that's something that we're going to ask the General Assembly to take a look at, is using income taxes to hold down property taxes seems to be a pretty popular move. And so losing that authority is something that could dramatically affect property tax payers. So we want to revisit that if the General Assembly is willing to do so, and see if there's a way to use income tax to hold down property taxes, at least for homesteads or residential property, because they're the ones who pay the income tax. Corporations and businesses generally don't pay the local income taxes. So not sure they deserve relief from an income tax used for property tax relief because they're not contributing.
Yeah, and I'll say, the biggest other thing is that you have to readopt the local income tax rate every year, which is a higher transparency, but it's also less revenue stability and ability to do financing for local government. So we're also probably going to look at changing that. But there are a couple of other reform mechanisms on the page about the other restrictions in the new lit system that are a bit technical and more local government focused.
All right, here's our contact information. If you have any questions, I know Commissioner Brown had a video earlier on. She's done a great job representing Allen County. She's been a clerk, auditor, and commissioner. She's been president of our association and a great leader. And I know she's not planning on running again next year, but she's done a fantastic job, I think, for Allen County in her time as an elected official there.
Yeah, when we're both happy to answer any questions about this. We answer questions about it all day long, so feel free to email us.
Well, thank you both so much. That was incredible. Really appreciate that breakdown, and really grateful you were able to be here with us today. So with all of that information under our belts, you're probably wondering what's next for you as a property owner in your local community. As you've heard from local leaders on this event, there's still a lot of unknowns and moving parts about exactly how Senate Enrolled Act 1 will impact you on a local level. We as AARP Indiana will continue to watch how communities take action, as well as monitor changes that may come at the Indiana General Assembly in 2026. So AARP Indiana was successful during the 2025 General Assembly, working to ensure that our voices were at the table to help older residents stay in their homes as they age, preserving housing affordability and stability. Senate Enrolled Act 1 contains language that allows counties to continue a program for qualified individuals to defer $100 to $500 of their property tax liability annually, up to a total of $10,000. The taxes would be paid back with interest when the home is sold or the estate is settled. AARP Indiana supported this deferral program that offers a balanced approach to the challenge of funding vital community services while providing tax relief to those who need it most. In order to help state leaders to better understand how increasing property taxes impacts older homeowners in Indiana, in December of 2024, AARP commissioned a poll of Indiana voters age 50 plus who own a home in the state. And the findings showed that after seeing steep increases in property taxes over the past several years, older Hoosiers are increasingly worried about the financial pressure these taxes are causing and looking towards state leaders to provide some relief. So to better understand how rising property taxes are affecting older Hoosiers, AARP Indiana commissioned a survey of people 50 and older, and this data helps us advocate for meaningful relief that reflects the real experiences of our members. We surveyed 1,001 registered voters aged 50 and older who live in Indiana and own their own homes. The survey revealed that 84% of older homeowners have seen their property taxes increase in the past 3 years. 2/3 say that these increases have impacted their household budgets, and this is a clear signal that property taxes are becoming a financial strain. Support for property tax relief crosses party lines. Whether Republican, Democrat, or Independent, older voters agree that lowering property taxes should be a priority for lawmakers. There is strong support for practical solutions. Nearly 3/4 of respondents support a new statewide tax credit for older homeowners, and even more support the option to pay property taxes monthly, making it easier to manage their household budgets. Property taxes do not exist in a vacuum, however. Rising costs in areas like home repairs, insurance, transportation, and medical expenses mean that even small increases in property taxes can tip the balance for older adults. The majority of Hoosiers say future increases could make it hard for them to afford staying in their homes. And so with all that being said, we have arrived at the end of our event, and I know that there was a lot of information in a very short period of time. If you do have questions about deductions or relief eligibility, please reach out to your county auditors, as they will be the best point of contact for where you live. You can also visit the websites that you see on your screen right now. There's a tax bill estimator that you can use, and also there's the AARP Foundation Property Tax Aid website that you can check out for additional resources. And lastly, I would like to invite Jeff Hale back on the screen to close us out for today and invite you to join AARP Indiana's efforts to advocate for Hoosiers 50 plus. Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. So first, thank you for joining us and your attention to this very important topic. I hope you're better informed about where we are as older Hoosiers who live in Allen County and the impact that we still make both in and on our community. At the start, I invited you to join AARP Indiana in our efforts on this issue, or really any issue that impacts older Hoosiers and their families. The first is to sign up to receive our advocacy alerts by scanning the QR code, which will take you to our registration site. You can also sign up to receive text messages from AARP Indiana by following the directions that you see on the screen. And with that, again, thank you to our guests, and thank you for joining us. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.